What if you had lived in the Devonian period? Many of us are concerned with the question, if man had appeared on Earth earlier, would he have been able to survive in other eras? In different geological periods of life on our planet, conditions were very different from those familiar to modern man. The continents were located differently. Weather conditions were different. Plant and animal life was different. Even the composition of water and air was different. We have already told about the possibility of human survival in the Age of Dinosaurs. This time we will try to travel to even earlier times in the Devonian period. If you are interested in history, the development of life on Earth, and you want to be the first to know about the release of new videos, we recommend subscribing to our channel. Here you can learn about scientific theories related to the various stages of its formation. Also, our subscribers have the opportunity to share their opinions in the comments. With the help of likes, you can express your attitude to the work of the creators of this channel. So, Devonian period. It is also called the Age of Pisces. It lasted 56 million years. At this time there was a development of land by living organisms, but the greatest diversity of animal and plant species can boast of the underwater world of the planet. Such a number of species of fish, arthropods, mollusks, sponges, corals, and polyps was not observed in any other epoch. But at the beginning and at the end of this period, the conditions of life on Earth were very different. Let's try to compare them and decide where man would have felt more comfortable. To do this, let's evaluate the geological, climatic, atmospheric, and even culinary aspects of existence. Habitat geology Devonian period, characterized by high volcanic activity and constant movement of tectonic plates. At the beginning of the period, the Earth had two large continents, Eurasia and Gondwana. Both were located in the southern hemisphere. By the end of the period, they united into one supercontinent, Pangaea. In the process of constant movement of the Earth's crust, new mountains and islands were formed. In particular, it was at this time that the present-day British Isles and the North American Appalachian mountain range were formed. The movement and collision were accompanied by regular volcanic eruptions, tsunamis, and earthquakes, but after the final unification of the continents, the activity went down. It turns out that from the point of view of geology, people would have lived more comfortably in the central part of Eurasia and Gondwana, and should have moved closer to the coast only after their final unification. But at the beginning of the Devonian period, life was centered just off the coast. The central regions of the early Devonian were virtually bare desert, flora and fauna. By the end of the Livonian period, the entire land surface was covered with tropical forests. The trees of that time reached a ginormous size, although in modern terms they were not really trees. In structure they rather resembled ferns, and they reproduced not by seeds, but by spores. But this did not prevent them from growing several tens of meters in height. There are finds of the remains of such giant ferns with a trunk thickness of up to 30 meters. This means that a man who got to this period would have been quite well provided with fuel and building material, but it would hardly have been possible to get food at the expense of plants. At that time, plants had not yet developed fruits that could be harvested. There would have been no point in farming either, unless some plant parts could have served as a seasoning or an additional source of vitamins. Getting food by hunting in the Devonian period would also have been difficult. The fact is that the land was inhabited mainly by insects and arthropods. It was among arthropods that the most dangerous terrestrial predators for humans could be found. Not only that, rachoscorpions were the size of an average dog, so they had a serious weapon, powerful claws. Scientists also believe that the Devonian rachoscorpions were venomous. Most likely the sting at the end of their tail performed the same function as modern scorpions. It is not entirely clear how tasty and nutritious such prey would have been, although in some Southeast Asian countries, scorpions are now considered a delicacy. Just at this time, fish began to explore the land. In the process of exploration, they became first amphibians and then full-fledged reptiles. These reptiles had not yet begun to grow to the size of dinosaurs, so at the end of the Devonian period, humans would have had the opportunity to eat something like the modern varan. A significant addition to the human diet would have been the collection of mollusks and trilobites in the tidal zone of the seas and oceans. Mollusks of that time did not differ much from modern ones in appearance and way of life, which means that their meat should be about the same in flavor and nutrition. extinct trilobites probably tasted similar to crabs. The most efficient way to provide food during this period would have been fishing. The seas and oceans of that era were home to a huge number of shell and cartilaginous fish of different species and sizes. By learning to catch them, one could forget about hunger forever. But here, it would be important not to become someone else's prey. Devon's biggest and most fearsome predators lived in the water. The huge shellfish of the Dunkleosteid could well mistake a man in the water or a boatload of fishermen for their prey. In the event of such an encounter, there would have been little chance of rescue. What to speak about the huge number of prehistoric sharks and rays, which usually fed on the monsters described above. Climate. Throughout the Devonian period, the climate on our planet was hot and humid. The average annual temperature at the beginning of the period was about 30 degrees Celsius, and toward the end it decreased to about 25 degrees. And now on the Earth there are corners with similar climate. People in them live long ago and do not experience serious problems, but the end of this period put a sharp cooling. The onset of another ice age could be a threat to human survival. Many scientists believe that this is the reason for the extinction of almost all living things from this period. Atmosphere. Another reason for the extinction could have been a change in the composition of the atmosphere. At the beginning of the period, there was a large amount of carbon dioxide in the air. This created a greenhouse effect and was the cause of the hot climate. But as the plants moved onto land, the oxygen release increased. The ocean was already full of green algae. They were releasing oxygen in huge quantities. Many organisms were unable to adapt to the change in gas composition, water, and air. At the end of the Devonian period, the oceans were virtually empty. Ice Age. In any case, the decrease in the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere led to a decrease in the greenhouse effect. The planet's climate became dramatically colder. This led to the onset of another ice age, and it is not known whether the people who fell in the Devonian period would have been able to cope with such an ordeal or not. Even now, there are places on Earth where it is impossible to survive without proper knowledge and skills. An unprepared person can die from heat, from cold, from lack of water and food, as well as from the attack of wild animals. This is possible in circumpolar regions, deserts, tropical jungles, and other undeveloped regions. At the same time, the world would be familiar and understandable to humans, and plants and animals would be the most common for our era. In the Devonian period, people would have had to face a completely different world, with its own laws and rules. From all of the above, we can draw the following conclusion. Theoretically, people could have survived in the Devonian period, but their survival would have depended on the time and place of habitation. Also, preparation and having the necessary skills would have been important. What if a person traveled to the age of the dinosaurs? Time travel is a familiar plot of fantasy books and movies. But the heroes of such works usually fall into times when at least some human society already exists. We know many examples of fiction about the adventures of our contemporaries in the Wild West in the Middle Ages, and even in the Stone Age. But not every author dares to throw his hero hundreds of millions of years ago, in the era and dinosaurs. To describe the nature and living conditions of people who somehow incomprehensibly got into the world inhabited by giant reptiles is quite difficult, because in addition to dinosaurs and other animals, people will have to face a huge number of all sorts of inconveniences, starting with a different composition of the atmosphere, as well as climatic conditions and ending with the lack of edible fruits and familiar plants. Learn more about the real flora and fauna of the era. Dinosaurs can be found in other videos on our channel. By subscribing to our channel, you can be the first to know about the release of new videos. With the help of likes and comments, any viewer can share their opinion on the topics covered in our videos. Most often, science fiction writers place dinosaurs in the conditions familiar to us. Usually, it was a remote corner of an unexhausted continent, as in Conan Doyle's The Lost World, or a small island in the ocean, as in Spielberg's Jurassic Park. But in this case, people were threatened by only one serious danger: dinosaurs themselves. And at accidental or deliberate moving to the age of dinosaurs, all environment will be not only alien, but also hostile for a person. Most likely, an accidental hitman alone would not last a few days among dinosaurs. But a prepared group of trained specialists could not only survive in those conditions, but also exist safely in the New World. The first problem that must be solved in the preparation of such an expedition: a different gas composition of the planet's atmosphere. In particular, at the time of the dinosaurs, there was much less oxygen in the air. It is known that when there is a lack of oxygen, the consequences can be very diverse. Therefore, the best way out for a scientific expedition would be to use its own oxygen tanks with a mixture of gases familiar to our respiratory system. Living and working rooms in this case should be made airtight, and appropriate equipment should be used in them. Maybe the reaction of the human organism to the air of the dinosaur era will not be so threatening, but it is still better to be insured. Not less, and problem will be the absence of habitual food. In the era of dinosaurs did not exist not only familiar to us fruits, but also trees on which these fruits could grow. Of course, you can try to get food by hunting or fishing, but the ancestors of the usual species of fish that lived at that time were much larger than their current descendants. They themselves did not mind eating a small animal that entered the water. In the case of a prearranged expedition, the problem of food would not be so acute. First, any such group will be supplied with a sufficient stock of food. A balanced menu will be drawn up. It will allow the explorers to do their direct work rather than constantly searching for food. There will also be organized teams of hunters and fishermen able to catch local animals without risking their lives. Undoubtedly, when preparing a long expedition to the time of the dinosaurs, people should take with them not only a stock of provisions, but also seeds of modern agricultural plants, and then in a few years a small colony will be able to feed itself independently. Also, much will depend on the place where the supposed time traveler will get. Some scientists believe that the most dangerous place on the Earth of the dinosaur era was the territory of the modern Sahara Desert. But it is very difficult for an unprepared person to survive in the conditions of any wilderness alone. There is no need to travel anywhere in time to do so. Modern taiga, African savanna, or polar regions carry no less danger, and the prospect of being eaten by a lion or bear is no different from dying in the teeth of a tyrannosaurus. In different parts of the modern Earth, too, there may be problems with climate, water, and food. Surviving in the Sahara now without experience and equipment is also almost impossible, although now there are no tropical forests inhabited by giant lizards. Let's pass, at last, directly to the masters of the planet of that time, dinosaurs. Speaking of getting into the era of dinosaurs, many people imagine adventures in the spirit of movies about Jurassic Park, where behind each tree awaits the terrible T.rex or Spinosaurus. But the laws of nature are unchanging, and they are the same then as now. The larger the predator, the larger the territory of its hunting grounds. In the case of large dinosaurs, this territory must have occupied more than 1 square kilometer. Therefore, the probability of meeting with the then king of beasts and a person who is not of interest to him as prey would not be very high. As has already been said, as food, the large predators of the dinosaur era would simply not have been interested in man. The object of their hunting interest was large herbivores. Humans would have had to confront someone in their weight class. One should not think that all reptiles of that time were the size of a truck. Giant dinosaurs are thought to have made up only 5% of their total number. The forests of the dinosaur era were inhabited by a huge number of smaller lizards. Many of them would not have posed any danger to humans. Their main concern was not to become anyone's dinner. They probably perceived humans as a threat as well. The hunting grounds of the modern Amur tiger can exceed 100 square kilometers in area. Their size depends on the amount of prey in the territory. Most likely to feed themselves, Tyrannosaurus, and other large predators of the Age of Dinosaurs occupied a comparable territory. There's a good chance that one man who fell back in time would not have encountered a single T.rex on his journey. So, if the issues of reduced oxygen and lack of familiar food are resolved, it would have been quite possible for humans to live among dinosaurs, well-armed, and a trained group. Could do it with relative comfort, given the availability of weapons, equipment, transportation, and building materials. People, and in the Age of Dinosaurs, could become masters of the planet, but one person, even the most prepared, is unlikely to be able to act as Robinson for a long time. But this applies not only to such fantastic time travel, but also to getting into extreme conditions on a quite habitable and almost safe land of our time. Survival alone, in the desert, taiga, jungle, or in the far north, is a difficult and dangerous venture and without any dinosaurs. What if man had lived right after the extinction of the dinosaurs? We all know that mammals only got their chance to evolve after the extinction of the dinosaurs. Before that, they remained in their shadow and did not even think about fighting for the top step of the food pyramid. Our channel has repeatedly discussed questions about how humans would have been able to survive in different periods of Earth's development. Today we will try to imagine what would have awaited humans immediately after the end of the dinosaur era, and whether humans could have survived at that time or not. If you want to be the first to know about the release of new videos on history, the evolution of life on our planet in the era of the dinosaurs and other historical periods, then we advise you to subscribe to our channel. We also encourage our viewers to express their opinions about our work more actively in the comments under the videos and help promote them with the help of likes. To understand how the man would feel immediately after extinction of dinosaurs, we need to define with conditions of life of that time. At once it is necessary to specify in the reasoning we will not consider a question whether the person could appear at that moment by evolutionary way. The answer to this question is unambiguous. No, it could not. Conditions for appearance of the first primates have developed on the Earth only after some tens million years. In our video, man inexplicably suddenly appeared at the end of the Cretaceous period, and we will simply consider all aspects of its possible existence at that time. By the end of the era of dinosaurs, the climatic conditions on Earth were quite acceptable for the existence of man. The geography of that time was represented by a single supercontinent, Gondwana, which was almost entirely covered by tropical jungles. Accordingly, the climate was humid and hot. Now, many inhabitants of our planet live in similar conditions on the territory of South America, Africa, Southeast Asia. Such a climate can be considered quite acceptable for life. But do not forget that one of the main reasons for the disappearance of dinosaurs is considered a long nuclear winter, which was caused by the fall of a giant asteroid. Behind this fall, a monstrous shock wave and tsunamis up to 100 meters high passed across the planet. Also, volcanic activity intensified. Multiple earthquakes began. The mass of dust and volcanic ash rose into the air and practically closed the Earth's surface from sunlight, and this led to severe cooling and disappearance of most plants and animals on the planet. Only small life forms survived in such climatic conditions. The largest mammal of the period weighed no more than half a kilogram. Let's assume that our supposed time travelers missed all these cataclysms and appeared on an already relatively calm planet in the midst of a nuclear winter. Let's also assume that they could already build a fire, build warm dwellings, and sew themselves the necessary clothes. Then let's try to understand what they would have had to eat. For the first 100,000 years after the fall of the huge meteorite, our planet was inhabited by the most primitive species of animals and plants. It must be remembered that no real trees existed then. Tropical jungles, which covered the planet at the end of the Cretaceous period, consisted mainly of huge ferns, and if it was still possible to build a house and make a fire from their trunks and branches, then before the appearance of fruit trees remained several 100,000 years, and people could hardly eat the leaves of ferns. It is also quite difficult to assume that humans would have been able to survive through hunting. As already mentioned, the surviving mammals and birds were extremely small. For any large group of people to survive, they would have had to be hunted on an industrial scale. This, in the harsh conditions of constant cold, darkness, and smoky air, does not look very promising. It may be recalled that the extinction did not affect aquatic life that much. Many species of fish survived, as well as crocodiles and turtles. Perhaps living near water bodies, people would have had a chance to get some sustenance, but to make warm clothes out of fish scales or turtle shells is difficult. After the mass extinction, nature recovered both quantitatively and qualitatively very quickly. For the first 100,000 years of the Mesozoic era, the diversity of species on Earth was already comparable to the end of the dinosaur era. The climate was changing. The nuclear winter was gradually receding. The first palm trees appeared on Earth. Mammals reached the size of modern raccoons or small dogs. They weighed about 5 to 6 pounds. This development was due to the plant's nut-like fruits. Perhaps if humans had appeared at that time, their chances of survival and development would have been much higher than at the beginning of the era. 700 years after the extinction of the dinosaurs, another evolutionary breakthrough occurred in the plant world of the planet. The first leguminous plants appeared. This enabled animals to eat more efficiently. Mammals of that time already had an average weight of about 50 kilograms. For humans at this time, a prospect such as agriculture may have opened up. Many primitive human civilizations, like the Indians of South America, assimilated legume crops quite effectively and were able to establish the first state associations on their territory. Scientists believe that it took about 1 million years for the planet to fully recover from the effects of the meteorite impact that wiped out the dinosaurs. To reach the size of modern horses or bison mammals could only 10 million years after the disappearance of giant lizards, that is about 56 million years ago. All this time, climate change and the division of continents continued. It seems to us that the first modern humans appeared at that time. Their development could have followed the same path as in the real history of evolution. The Earth was no longer a continuous jungle. The forests consisted of quite modern trees. Many species of animals could have become worthy hunting or livestock. Let us imagine which of the creatures of the beginning of this era could have been utilized by man. Andrew's Arch. One of the main dangers to humans that could have lived in the early era is the Andrew's Arch. These guide animals, weighing up to 900 pounds, were the largest predatory mammals that had ever lived on the planet. Outwardly, they rather resembled representatives of dogs or wolves than relatives of modern pet pigs. But if it is known that the first scientist animal was a dog, then why such helpers of man on the hunt could not become, if not this giant, then someone of its smaller relatives? Indricotherium. These distant ancestors of modern rhinos were the largest land mammals in the history of life on the planet. They inhabited the territory of Asia and had a truly gigantic size. According to scientists, their growth could reach 6 meters, and the length of the body of 8 meters, weighed these giants up to 20 tons. If primitive people were able to organize corral hunts for mammoths, they could well think of a way to extract such a mountain of meat. And if they were domesticated like Indian elephants, they would be a good alternative to trucks, underground cranes, or tanks, depending on how they were used. Hyperion. This extinct animal from the horse family was distributed almost all over the world. Its remains have been found in Europe, Africa, and North America. Hyperion had a height of about 1.5 meters and differed little from the modern horse. It could hardly be comfortably ridden, but it could be adapted as a draft animal. Birds. This period in evolutionary history could well be called the Age of Birds. After the extinction of the dinosaurs, a large number of large non-flying feathered creatures appeared, which were carnivorous and successfully hunted small ungulates and rodents. A striking representative of such creatures were phororhacos, but their smaller relatives for humans could be the prototype of domestic chickens. At the same time, a large number of flying birds of prey appeared. They were real giants, such as Argentavis. His wingspan reached 7 meters, and the weight of 70 kilograms. From the above, we can conclude that the chances of human survival immediately after the extinction of the dinosaurs were extremely small. But with each subsequent million years, the conditions on the planet became more and more comfortable for modern man. And if he had appeared not 200 years ago, but 50 million years earlier, he might have been able to fit quite comfortably into the realities of the time. What if we had lived in the Stone Age? Hearing the phrase Stone Age, most of us imagine people dressed in animal skins and armed with stone axes, spears, and clubs. Also in our minds with this time are associated with stories about hunting mammoths, about life in cold caves and the constant struggle for survival. But by the standards of history, these times ended recently, and a large period of the Stone Age was associated with people who were virtually no different from us in appearance, and often did not differ from us in behavior. Today we will try to imagine what a person of our time would have experienced if they had been in the Stone Age. This channel publishes videos about the development of life on Earth in different periods of its existence. If you are interested in answers to questions related to evolution, paleontology, history, and modern environmental problems, we advise you to subscribe to our channel. This will allow you to learn about the release of new videos and be the first to leave your comments. We also encourage viewers of the channel to express their opinion about our work with the help of likes. Stone Age is usually called a long period in the history of our planet, associated with the emergence and development of the first species of people. It is believed that this period began more than 2 million years ago. The epoch received its name because the main material for the manufacture of tools, weapons, and other items for life was stone. It is almost impossible to name the exact date of the end of the Stone Age, because the transition to a new stage of development of society in different parts of our planet occurred at different times. Indians of North and South America lived in conditions of Neolithic by the moment of opening of continents and appearance on their territories of the first Europeans. Some isolated tribes in the Amazon, in the jungles and on the islands of Oceania, still lead a life of hunters and gatherers. Some scientists attribute the end of the Stone Age to the beginning of the active use of metal tools. Others believe that it ended with the appearance of the first large cities and the final transition to a sedentary way of life. The period we call the Stone Age is divided into 3 time periods: the Paleolithic, or Old Stone Age, which began about 2 million years ago; the Mesolithic, or Middle Stone Age, the beginning of which is usually measured from the 100th century BC; Neolithic, or New Stone Age. Its beginning is about 8,000 years BC. Each of these periods differed slightly in their climatic conditions and the composition of animal and plant life, but throughout all 3 parts of the Stone Age, there were different kinds of people, and so modern man, who somehow inexplicably would have gotten Stone Age, would have been able to adapt and survive. This time we will not consider the possibilities of survival, trained and armed scientific teams. Now, it's clear that the climate, the composition of the atmosphere, the plants and animals, different from our time. So a time expedition would have no problem working in Stone Age conditions. Better we will try to imagine what difficulties and unusual things an unprepared person will face in different periods of the Stone Age. Let's start with the Paleolithic. At that time, the last representatives of such a species of our ancestors as Australopithecus were still walking the earth. They appeared about 4 million years ago and became extinct about 1 million years ago. It is proved that at least one species of Australopithecus, who lived in Africa, was able to move on 2 legs. The brains of these ancient humans was comparable to the brains of today's large primates. They were no taller than 1.5 meters and were almost completely covered in wool. It is thought that later, Australopithecines could have hunted ungulates together or taken prey from predators. But no signs that Australopithecus used any tools or built dwellings have been found so far. Any modern man would have been a giant among these creatures and could have taught them how to use fire or make primitive devices. But the nomadic, semi-starvation life of these primates under the harsh African sun would have been very hard for us. Also about 2.5 million years ago in the territory of southern and eastern Africa lived representatives of such species, a man skillful. It is believed that this species evolved from one of the Australopithecus species. Habilis look very similar to Australopithecus but have a number of significant differences. Their legs and pelvic bones were already more adapted for walking on the ground than for climbing trees. The structure of their hands allowed them to form the so-called power grip, which allowed the man of skill to create the first tool and weapon. Their brain exceeded in size the brain of Australopithecus, and they had more developed frontal, parietal, and temporal lobes of the brain. This is evidence of intelligence. But the structure of the larynx didn't yet allow these creatures to speak intelligible sounds. The maximum growth of a man of skill is estimated at 120 centimeters. Men of this species weighed no more than 50 kilograms, and women no more than 30. Outwardly, they were much closer to modern humans than Australopithecus. Probably among people of skill, our time traveler would have had a better chance of survival. But given the lack of normal speech, contact with them would still have been difficult. It is likely that a being so vastly different would not have been accepted, not by the Australopithecines, not by man of reason. It is quite possible that it would have simply been killed, and maybe even eaten. Perhaps modern humans would have been able to make closer contact with such a species, the erect man. According to various estimates, he appeared 300–400 years ago, migrated from Africa on different continents. The first discovery of remains of this species was made on the island of Java. The most ancient man erect was found in the American state of Georgia. Different groups of scientists dispute its African origin and suggest that it originated already in Asia, where several species of man, upright. But most researchers agree that he is our direct ancestor. Man upright was distinguished by a large brain and were able to make fairly complex tools. It's also thought that they were the first to use fire and build dwellings. We already have a lot in common with these guys, and to survive in their company, modern man would probably be very likely to survive in their company. Also, without problems, modern people could fit into the culture of such species as Neanderthals and Cro-Magnons. Both of them already possessed many crafts, knew how to collectively hunt and stockpile food, took care of weak and defenseless members of clans and tribes, and had their own primitive culture and, perhaps, religion. This is not to mention that Cro-Magnons are ourselves, only not yet spoiled by civilization. About 10,000 years ago, different species of our ancestors roamed the plains of Africa, Europe, and Asia, and began their journey to discover America and Australia. They lived in small family groups and had little contact with their neighbors. In those times, the population of the whole world was smaller than now, for example, the population of Moscow. Therefore, it is unlikely that new technologies spread across the earth with great speed. Most likely, all known devices for hunting, fishing, production of clothes, utensils, and other necessary things were invented in different places thanks to the inquisitive minds of ancient people. That was the key to their survival and prosperity. About 8,000 years ago, sedentary agriculture appeared. People began to build not temporary camps, but real, albeit small, cities and towns. Their diet and way of life were quite similar to the life of modern people living in agriculture. Of course, nowadays other materials and technologies are used. More productive varieties of plants and domesticated animals are used. But even with the most minimal set of tools and other resources, almost any modern person can cope with building a house and providing food for themselves. After all, exactly the same people with even more meager resources and, most importantly, knowledge were able to eventually become masters of the entire planet and even begin to explore space. We thank everyone who watched the video to the end. On this channel have repeatedly raised questions about the possibility of survival.